Welcome back to another VR tutorial. In this episode, I'm going to continue where we left off in my other video. And if you haven't watched my first video that took you step by step how to create this virtual reality museum, I highly suggest you go and watch that episode first, because this one builds upon what we've already learned in the first episode. Maybe you found this video because you're looking to figure out how to add audio and video and custom movement to your projects, and that is what we are covering in this episode. It's amazing. Let's take a quick look at what you'll be able to do. Notice I've placed a box here and a box here. These serve as triggers to play audio when I'm looking at this picture, and this one will trigger video that you'll see right here. Let's take a quick look. It was an incredible wedding at the Magic Kingdom in Disney World, Florida, and here's a picture of Tiffany and I standing with Mickey and Minnie, and guess what? We didn't have our outfits planned ahead of time. Just luck. And then I have a huge surprise for you. You know how you can teleport like this in VR? Well, I made you guys custom controls, and it's available for download for free if you look at the description. Here's fade movement, which enables you to just move and has fade in and fade out. Now here is dash movement, where you can actually just pick a place and you slide to it, which helps with people who have motion sickness. But then the best is for last, walking. If you choose walking, now you can just walk around in your museum, and you can use these controls for any of your projects as well. But if you download the package that I put together for you in the session description, you got it all. So like I said, we're going to learn how to expand upon what we've already learned in lesson 1. Before you start this tutorial, definitely check out the description in the YouTube video, because I put a link so that you can download this entire package. Now, you don't need to download this. You can literally take the museum that you've already created and then add what I'm going to teach you in this episode. The only thing you won't have is these custom movement controls that I showed you earlier. And I think walking around the museum is really nice. So feel free to download this package. However, of course, if you did any work in the first where you customize your own photos and such, you'll need to do that work all over again. The other thing that we're going to dive into this episode is blueprinting. I'm going to teach you blueprinting in the way that I understand blueprinting. And I'm going to say that like mere mortals. Hopefully the way I explain it to you will teach you what these nodes do and what these arrows do and that type of stuff. And we need these blueprints to trigger those audio and video playing. So we're going to look at that in this episode as well. I'm also going to show you in this video how, when you use the restart button on your VR controller, how to restart into the art museum as opposed to restarting to the standard VR template. So when you download the new museum for this particular lesson, you'll notice that there's 3 pictures with the space helmet laying on the ground. Those are the pictures that we're going to make changes to. You'll also notice that when you click the top button on your left controller, it pulls up this custom menu that I made for you guys. And I really want to give a shout out to Unreal Sensei for his masterclass on Unreal, where I learned how to create this interface for you. What I recommend that you do really for any project that you work on where you need to have custom assets is in the left content folder. That's where everything is for this particular project. And what I highly recommend that you do is you right click on content and make new folders. And this one, I'll call it custom art, because I'm going to add some custom art. Then I will make another folder and call that custom audio. And you can name this whatever you want. It doesn't have to have the word custom, of course, but I'm just trying to keep a consistent convention, and I'll call it custom video. But it could be like my video, my art, my audio, whatever you feel is needed. So I made an audio file right here. I have this Disney Tower of Terror that you saw play, and then I have the Mickey picture. And the way that I made the audio recording is I used Windows Sound Recorder. So let me pull that up and go to Windows Sound Recorder. This program is very straightforward, but the thing that you need to do besides making sure that it works, so let's do a quick test. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I know my microphone works. I'm going to delete that. What you need to make sure that you do is come up to the top right where the settings are and make sure under recording format that you're using the wave lossless format. Some of these other formats are not supported by Unreal, but wave certainly is, and so make sure that you have that checked. In terms of audio quality, it's your voice. So I've got high quality selected, but you certainly could go for a smaller size if you're going to do longer audio recordings. And essentially what I did is, with all that selected, I said something like, here's a photo of Tiffany and I at the Magic Kingdom for a lovely wedding that we attended. And look, we're standing here with Minnie and Mickey, and guess what? We didn't actually plan our outfits to match so well with them. That was just luck. So I said something like that, and then I saved the file, and that's what this file is right here. So now that we have this audio file, wherever you have it on your machine, bring it into your custom audio folder and just drop it in there. We're going to use that in just a bit. In custom video, this particular video right here, let's look at the properties. I believe it's an MP4. Yep, it's an MP4 file. So I'm going to drag in the Disney video. And so you can put in your own MP4s. Other formats will probably work, but that's what I'm using. And then for custom art, I'm going to drag in this photo of Tiffany and I with Mickey and Minnie. Now the photo is the easiest one to do. We saw how to do that in the first video. I just dragged that onto an existing photo, and there we have it. And in the video, I believe I mentioned earlier that when you move some of these pictures around, you might see some different shadows on the wall that were created when the lighting was baked in. It's really important that I show you how to build your new lighting. Now, you do not need to do this now. In fact, I recommend that you don't, because it takes a long time. But when you have everything set in place, if you do see shadows on the wall, come up to the build menu and build your lighting. You can choose the lighting quality. I have high set. You can do it in preview mode if you want. Nothing wrong with that. But it will take a little time to build your lighting. But that's how you get rid of the shadows on the wall. This one in particular, when I resized it from a tall picture in portrait mode to landscape, it had shadows behind it. And that's how I got rid of it. The other thing I've done with this particular template is I've cleaned up a few things. I definitely made sure that the nav mesh area to walk around in, I fixed that up a little bit and made sure it was right at the floor level with the right width and the right height. So movement around here is much better. I also took out some cameras and things that were objects inside the museum that were really just not needed. So when you downloaded that, it might be a little different from the original version that you have, but otherwise I didn't really touch too much in here. So let's go ahead and teach you how to play audio when someone walks up to this picture in VR. So for me to do that, the first thing I need to do is throw my artwork on there. And I'm going to use the same Disney picture that we have on the one right here. But when I walk up to this one, it's going to play the audio file. So how do you do that? Designing in VR is very similar to making a video game. So this menu right here is the menu you use to add different objects into your environment. And there's a volume that I want you to get, and that's called the trigger volume. And the trigger volume is a box. There it is right there. So I'm just going to pull it out. That when someone enters this, it could be your hand touching it, your body touching it, what have you, this box will trigger an action. So all you really need to do is think about where you want this box to be and how tall it is. And so let's go ahead and resize this. By the way, a little tip, and I need to do this myself. If you have a mouse with multiple buttons on it, I highly recommend that you map changing these settings to buttons. Now it shows you the hotkey R, E, and W. And so that is probably enough for some because they're right up here. But it is nice to map it to your mouse. So I'm going to make it lower, and I'm going to make it slightly bigger. Now you want to give some thought. Notice I'm lining it up to the picture, and let's go here. You want to give some thought to whether or not you want to allow the person to walk by without triggering it. And I think we should. So let me make that a little narrower. And then little trick here. If you want to drop something to the floor, hit the N key on your keyboard, and that drops it right to the floor. So there we go. I think we should make it a little bit closer in case they get right up on it. But from a viewing perspective, it's really nice in VR if you're out here. But if you're too far out, it won't trigger. Now, for those of you who don't want to get fancy, and I would love to hear from you in the comments if you do this, you might want to add some icons, either to the floor or on the wall, to show that there is audio that goes along with this picture, or there is video that goes along with this picture. And in later lessons, I'm going to teach you how you can, with your virtual reality hands, touch buttons to activate those things. It's very similar to what we're doing by just walking by, but I think it'd be really cool if you either put a designated area on the floor with audio or right in front of it to signal that the person can hear something. Now, because we're going to do a couple different trigger volumes, one for here and one for here, I do think it's good for you to name them. So over on the right-hand side where you've got all the item labels, if you right-click, you can come down under Edit and you can rename. So I'm going to add on the end of this trigger volume, we'll just call it Disney Art. Or how about Disney Photo 1? Because maybe I'm going to have more at some point. So now I can look for that, and I know that that's the trigger volume associated with this picture. Now, since I've already got this the right size and everything and where I want it, I can hold down the Alt key on my keyboard, click this yellow arrow or this arrow, whichever one, and slide out another one, and that makes a copy of it. If you notice, it changed it over here. So since we like this size, I'm just going to put it right in front, and we'll deal with that one in a little bit. But that way we've got some consistency, all right? And since we're not going to work with that one right now, let's just give it a name so we remember. And I will edit that one, and we'll call it Disney Trigger Volume Tower of Terror. All right, because it's going to play that video. All right, so we've set up our two triggers. And now this is exciting. I'm super excited for you guys. We're going to build our first blueprint together. And in order for us to do a blueprint, it's so funny because, these are called maps inside of Unreal. And I mentioned this in my first lesson, the other video that I hope you have watched. But sometimes they're called levels. And when you go and you do open level blueprint, it's interesting. I don't know why they didn't say open map blueprint, because they're not consistent with the terminology. But a level and a map are synonymous. And so I'm going to open level blueprint, and here we are. Now, when we're creating a blueprint, one of the things to keep in mind is that we need to have our assets selected when we're working with it. So the most recent one that I work with is Tower of Terror, but I'm going to go back and select the Disney one. Now, I promise I'm going to try to do my best to explain blueprints in a way that you can understand them, but they are definitely advanced Unreal. So even though this is a beginner tutorial, you need to learn how to blueprint, because otherwise it's just pretty pictures in your environments and there's no interaction or activity. So with our trigger volume selected, I'm going to right click in the blueprint area. And if you notice, there's a checkbox that says context sensitive. So it's only giving me a list of things that Unreal thinks relates to what I have already selected. And if you'll notice under this add event for trigger volume 2, that's exactly what we want it to do. Now, why it says trigger volume 2 and not the new custom name I gave it, I don't know, but that is the right one. And if you expand it, you'll see collision. And if you open up collision, there's one that says add on actor begin overlap. And that's the first one we want. So we select it and it will pop onto the blueprint. Let me zoom in. So what this node is basically saying is when the actor is me, overlaps with this trigger box, enters it, then do something. And the then do something comes out of the top right here. Now, what do we want this to do? You'd have to read a lot of documentation or watch a lot of videos like I do, or take some courses like I have to figure out what these are. And, it's probably one of the downsides of Unreal is, with great power comes great responsibility, to quote Spider-Man. The one that we want to add here is spawn sound 2D. So if I right click here, I'm going to type spawn, S-P-A-W-N, and then I'll space and hit sound. And you'll see there's the F, which means this is a function. And if you hold your mouse over it, it will explain to you what the function is. Some of them even tell you where documentation is, but that's what we want. Now, the terminology of spawning comes from the video gaming area, I believe. And by the way, if you guys want to hate on me, if I tell you misinformation or any programs out there that want to explain things differently, feel free to drop a comment. But I am trying to explain it in the way that I understand it, and I believe this information to be correct. What we're saying is when you overlap that area, spawn a sound. So this wire that I've connected just by clicking with my left mouse and dragging dictates, think of this actually flowing down, but it's flowing to the right. This happens, then this happens. That's what these arrows do. Now, these right here are properties of it. So, for example, if I said, go to the refrigerator, well, which refrigerator if you have many of them in your house? So that's what this is, which sound. Now, because I've placed the Disney wedding in my project, it's showing up here. If you do not see your sound file here, then you've not already created your custom folder or at least put the sound in there. So let's pick the Disney Wave file. Now there's something else that we need to do, and that is expand this, because down here where it says auto destroy, I got to tell you, it took me like an hour to figure out there was an error that was happening, not while I compiled, but while it was running. And it was telling me that the object no longer existed. And the reason it no longer existed is because of auto destroy being turned on. So make sure you expand that and turn that off. What that means is, like when the sound, I believe when the sound stops playing, finishes playing, or ends playing, to destroy it. And because we're making reference to it, it was causing an error. So it will be all good. Those are the only thing that you need to do with those two nodes. Over on the left-hand side, you have functions, macros, variables, and events. So as I was saying earlier, if I was to tell you, go open the refrigerator, and it's what refrigerator, that's right here. If you opened the refrigerator, that is a true statement. So we need to have a variable where we're parking information about that sound. That's what the variable is doing, is we're setting that a property of the audio component. Again, confusing, but when I click on the plus, it gives me a chance to set the variable name. And we'll call this 2D sound. You could give different variable names. I'm just giving that one. You could name it whatever you want. After you've given it a name, notice that the default is for it to be Boolean. That's on or off. That is not what we want. So over on the right-hand side, you could do it here, but I think it's better to teach you to do it over on the right-hand side. You want to drop down and you want to type audio space component. Now, because there's the word audio component under structure and object type, make sure you choose the one that's under object type. And when you choose that, it sets that variable to be that. And so we've created that variable. And now that we've created this variable, we are going to drag it onto the blueprint and choose set 2D sound, not get 2D sound, but we're setting the 2D sound. We're using the information that we took right here, and we're setting the 2D sound into that variable. That's what's happening in this step. Make sure that when you connect the line over to set, that you also connect the return value to 2D sound, so that value is sent over into the variable. Once you've done that, click on compile and click on save. And if I put on my VR goggles and tried this now, it would work. But that's not enough, because what happens if the person leaves the area while the sound is playing? I think we would want it to stop, because maybe it started playing and they weren't interested, or they walked too close to it. So we want to create another set of actions here in our blueprint to handle when they leave the area. To move in and out of the blueprint area, you can just roll your mouse, assuming you have a roll button on there. You can also right click and that moves it around. So I'm going to just drag that up a little bit. And I want to be able to have you see a good portion of it. Let me bring this in because I'm on a large monitor. And let's go down. Now, just like we had on actor begin overlap, we want to create the opposite. What happens when the actor leaves? So that's what we're going to do is we'll drop down to here. And we want to, again, make sure it's super important that the trigger volume is still selected for the Disney photo, because that's the trigger volume that we're dealing with right now. Right click, expand the add event, expand collision, and then grab add on actor and overlap. So now that we've created our first node that says when we end overlapping, when we're leaving that trigger volume, what do we want it to do? We want it to stop playing the audio. In order for us to do that, we got to right click and type the word stop. Now this is a great learning opportunity because this context sensitive over here, sometimes that can be the thing that you forget about. So make sure that if you don't see what you need, and you won't in this example, that you turn off context sensitive. Because what we're looking for is to stop the audio. And so even though I could scroll this whole list, but look, there's one under stop player, and there's one under stop audio, which looks like the right one there. But if I go stop audio, and I type it that far, the one that we want is an audio component. We want this stop right here. So it's a component, it's an audio component, and we want to stop it. And if you remember before, we created a variable that was a component that contained the audio sound. So now I think this light bulb is going to go on for you where it was a little confusing up above. Remember I said we're going to, if we enter the area, we're going to spawn a sound, and it said, what sound? The Disney wedding. Well, we parked that information in this variable. So now, even though it's pretty intuitive to think, okay, I want to go from here to here, notice the default is target self. It wouldn't know what to stop playing because it thinks it's itself, and you would get actually an error if you compiled and tried this. It just doesn't know what to do. In fact, let me see. Yep, you got an error right there. So we drag out the variable from the left-hand side with our left mouse, and I choose get sound so it knows what it is, and I plug it into target, recompile, and the error goes away. And I hope that little explanation of this was enough to make sense for you. When we enter it, play the sound, don't destroy the sound, set it, what sound we're playing, and then when I leave it, stop it. Let's give it a test. All right, I've got my VR goggles on. I'm picking up my controllers, and I'm pulling up the menu to walk. And I'm going to walk over to the Disney area, and once I hit that box, it was an incredible wedding at the Magic Kingdom in Disney World, Florida. And here's a picture of Tiffany and I standing with Mickey and Minnie. And guess what? We didn't have our outfits planned ahead of time. Just luck. And there you go. That's it. It's really, really cool. And like I said, in future videos, I'm happy to show you how to create buttons so that we can interact and play those things. But that's what it takes to play audio and stop audio. For the next part of this tutorial, there's a lot of similarities to what we did in the first one, but video is a bit different. What is the same is that we're using the trigger volume, but we're going to create a blueprint that has some different actions this time. Now I'm going to go into the custom video folder, and you'll notice that the video is in here. The reason that the video is in here, which I believe I showed earlier, is because when I created these three folders, I dragged and dropped the assets I was going to use in these folders. So I already have the file in here. But what I don't have is a media player. And a media player is an object. What we're doing with Unreal is we started with a base project, but we need to keep adding things to it to bring the kind of functionality that we want to the environment that we are building. Unreal has a lot of capabilities, and instead of giving you everything all at once, it lets you add in the things that you need as you need them. So I'm going to right click, and when I right click, I want to go to the media menu. And notice under the media menu, there is media player. So I'm going to add the media player. Please follow along because notice this checkbox right here that says video output media texture asset. Not the most intuitive sentence, that's for sure. So let me tell you what it means. When I check this box, it means that when I click on OK, it's going to make a media texture for me to use. And we want that. So be sure to check the box and click OK. You could give this media player a name, but notice right next to it, it made a media texture. The next step is for us to open the media player itself. And I'm going to double click and notice Disney is right here. So this media player can essentially have a playlist. And when I double click on Disney Tower of Terror, it's playing the video that Disney gave to us when we attended Disney World that you saw earlier in the video. And I'll stop it right there. When you stop the video, that will be the actual texture that's used as a placeholder. So I'm going to hit save and close. And now you can see the little thumbnail has that particular picture there. Now I can take this texture and drag it on to the wall. Now I did resize this photo. It was originally a portrait size one. So if you're using the old template from my first lesson, it may be different for you. And I just used the resizing tools up here at the top to make it wide. And I just got it in the right, like kind of 16:9 proportion. So now we've set up the media player part. And with that done, we can go back to the blueprint. To get back to our level blueprint, we come up to the little org chart and we choose open level blueprint. You can think about where you want to put this, but I'm going to just tuck it right underneath our end overlap event. And for this one, when you right click, you want to do open source. Once again, I don't see the node that I want, so I'll turn off context sensitive. And now it shows media player with open source. And that's the node that we want. Well, when do we want this to happen? Open source. And I'm teaching you a different way because now I've created a node, but I don't have the event that I want. And all I need to do to add the right event is just move my window over and go to that trigger volume. And if I go to the search box up here on the right and type the word trigger, I now see my two triggers. And that's why it was so important earlier to name them, because I don't even have to look behind this window to know that that's the one that I want. So with that selected, and I right click over here, I want to turn on context sensitive, and now it's my friend, because now under add event, I can go to collision and then choose again, add on actor begin overlap. So I did it a different way this time to show you that you can sometimes go in a different order, but just make sure that you connect the event, the trigger, to the open source. Let me zoom in a little bit more so you can see. Now, what media source do I want? I'm going to drop down, and just like when we picked the audio, I'm choosing the Disney Tower of Terror. I'm going to click on compile, and I'm going to click on save. You'll notice we have an error message. Well, why do we have an error message? Because this source doesn't know what media player to use. So as we did earlier, we need to create a variable for that media player. Click on the plus sign and type in media player. You can give it whatever name you want. In this case, I'm only using one media player, so I'm just going to stick with that one. Once you create it, just like we did with the audio component, we don't want to use Boolean, which is just yes or no. So we'll come over here and we'll type in media player. And if you'll notice under object types, there's a media player type. Select that one, and that sets this as a media player. Now that we've done that, we want to click on compile and then drag out the media player and choose get media player and then plug it into the target. In addition to doing that, we want to come to the drop-down menu and choose the default value. So when we drop down, we're going to choose that media player that we made over in our custom media folder. So now we've defined the default value, but we have plugged in this variable into our source. And when we click on compile, all our errors should go away. And they did. And now it's time for us to test again if everything's working. I'm going to click on the green play button either here or here. We'll play it. I've connected my goggles. And let's go ahead and walk over and see if the video plays. I can teleport over, or if I've used my custom movement controls that I gave to you, I can finish walking over, which I like, and watch the video. Now, everything is working really well except one big thing, and there's no audio. So the last step that we're going to do now that the video is working is add the audio to play. And that's why it's a little bit more complicated to make a media, like a video play in your environment versus the audio, but it's simple enough, so let's learn how. And all we need to do is with the painting selected, so I've clicked on this with my left mouse, and this is the painting right here. Again, feel free to change any of these names if you want, but what it's missing is an audio component. Even though it has a media component, it doesn't have a sound component. So it's got the media, but there's no sound. So I'm going to click on add, and I'm going to type sound, and there's media sound. All right, with my goggles on, let's do a final test and see if everything is working. When I teleport over, it was an incredible wedding at the Magic Kingdom in Disney World. And when I moved outside the box, it stopped playing. Everything works when I'm inside the box. It was an incredible wedding at the Magic Kingdom. All right, now let's go over to the video. And I'll finish walking over. What I wanted to show you is that when you now click restart, it brings you back to the museum. And let's show you how I did that. It's quite possible that you are now building your own VR environments, and the VR template defaults that when you click restart, it brings you to the VR template. So over in the left-hand corner, down where you have all the different content browsers, inside here is the blueprints. And in the blueprints area is now where the blueprints are for the custom menus. And I'm going to open up this widget menu on the right-hand side. So for example, when I click on the restart button over here on the left, notice that there are different events in the lower right corner. If I just click here, I get the text, but if I click the button just right up from the text, then I can see the events that take place. And what you would need to do is go to this icon that notice it says called when the button is clicked. And if I click on that, it brings me to the blueprint that controls what happens when you activate the restart button. And notice here, it has the name Art Museum for me. What it had was the VR template, and that's why when you choose restart, it brings you to that. But since you're all now probably working in a different environment, I wanted to make sure you knew that's where you change that. If you do make a change, you probably need to click on compile and save, and feel free to go ahead and test that out in your VR goggles. Well, that is going to do it for this lesson, our second lesson in the series. I'm going to continue teaching you guys things. For example, how to do interaction with your hands, how you can grab an object. We'll get into things like light switches and opening and closing doors. If there's any ideas or any particular things you want to learn, feel free to drop a comment. I read them all. I respond to most, if not all of them. And I really, really appreciate the community that we're building. We'll catch you all on the next episode.